for ages, I've had a front row seat to this cosmic drama. You know, it's a story that's as old as existence itself. This tale of, well, of everything locked in a terrifying, unending fight with absolute nothingness. Today, we're going to dive deep into this conflict, what our source material calls the Abyssal Dialectic, and, maybe more importantly, the flicker of hope that tries to break the whole cycle. And there you have it. That's really the heart of the matter. See, this isn't just some straightforward battle of good versus evil. It's what you'd call an ontological condition, which basically means it's a fundamental state of being, kind of like gravity. It's this unavoidable truth that anything we build, any meaning we create, is always, always being hunted by the shadow of its own disappearance. That's the grim reality we're starting with.
Okay, so let's set the stage for our first act. To really get this conflict, you have to understand the abyss itself. It's not this loud, raging chaos. No, you should think of it more like a trap. It's a lightless, stagnant place where all progress, all life, just stops. It gets frozen in this state of silent grief. And believe me, as a longtime observer, it's a place I know all too well.
So, just to be crystal clear, this is what we're talking about with the Abyssal Dialectic. It's this permanent, two-sided struggle. On one side, you've got sovereign existence. That's everything with structure, life, and purpose. And on the other side, absolute nothingness, the void. And they're just locked in this eternal chase that creates a philosophical trap with no obvious way out.
Right, and this deadlock isn't just some passive thing. It is actively enforced by these characters, the enforcers of entropy. You've got the Gorgon sisters, who don't discard the void. They offer a final, frozen end to everything, literally turning it all to stone. Then there's the Sea Stormer, who's like this dark scientist, writing the laws of decay directly into the molecules of the sea itself. And finally, the Captain, who's after this truly terrifying goal, a drought within the deep, designed to suck all the moisture out of reality.
So what's the result of this whole triadic nightmare? Well, it creates something the source calls a void blight. And under this blight, even basic concepts like time and space start to unravel. The emotional toll on any living soul, it's a state of silent, unending, frozen grief. Just total and complete hopelessness. But you know, even in a totally dark theater, one single torch can change everything. And that brings us to our second act. Right here, at the most terrifying crossroads you can imagine, the first real glimmer of an alternative shows up. Not a final answer, mind you, but a way to simply endure. And that way forward is offered by Hecate. Now, it's really important to get this. She's not a savior riding in to win the war. She's more like an architect. She provides the spiritual tools, the literal framework a soul needs to just survive the crushing pressure of what the source calls hydronihilism, this bleak philosophy of the void, this idea that all life will eventually just drown in nothingness. Now, this is where it gets really interesting, because it presents a choice. On one path, the Gorgons offer an end to the struggle through absolute, frozen stillness, a final cold death. But Hecate, she offers something totally different, logos magic. Logos is just an old word for reason or logic. So her magic isn't about overpowering the void. It's about using structure and reason to carve out just enough space for a consciousness to breathe. It's a path forward, not just a dead end.
So how does she do it? The source points to this idea, palingenesios energy. This is the fire burning in her torches. It's a purifying, transformative force that can literally burn away the saline ichor, which is the very essence of decay that the Sea Stormer writes into the world. It doesn't get rid of the darkness, but it sure does light up a path right through it. And this slide just lays out her process perfectly. First, she illuminates the dark with that energy. That light then makes the second step possible, reclaiming your sense of self, the absolute I, from the crushing, identity-erasing force of the non-I, which is the void's negation. And once you have a self again, the final step becomes possible, to rebuild the abyss from a grave into a laboratory for the spirit, a place of potential. All right, let's keep going and see how this all builds. Because if Hecate gives us the tools to endure, our next figure provides the power to actively challenge the void. This isn't about just surviving anymore. This is about injecting a shimmering logic of hope right into the heart of the problem. And enter Salome. She arrives as a spiritual counterweight. The source material describes the void's deadlock as hyper-masculine, this rigid, unyielding force of domination. Salome, representing the divine feminine, brings a totally different kind of power. Her whole purpose is to challenge the void's central claim that nothingness is the ultimate reality, and to instead assert presence and connection against all that negation.
And right here, we see a direct clash of philosophies. The captain's entire being is parasitic. He only exists by draining the world. But Salome's bond with the Leviathan is the complete opposite. It's a synthesis, a transformative transfer of energy that looks to restore the world's essence, not drain it. It's a fundamental fight between extraction and restoration.
So let's just remember the Sea Stormer's power for a second. His runes of the dead aren't just spells. They're described as unchangeable laws of finality, of entropy, that he literally writes into the molecular fabric of the ocean. Just picture this dark, cold magic spreading like ice, freezing the very potential for life at its most basic level. But Salome counters this with her own kind of magic. Her runes of divine wind create what's called a celestial mirror. So what does that mean? It means she targets the fundamental alphabet of reality itself, creating a whole new frequency of regenerative hope that works completely outside the void's established system. And that's how she cancels out that parasitic drought within the deep. Now, here's the really crucial part. This duel doesn't end with one side being totally destroyed. Salome's shimmering logic is way more nuanced than that. It doesn't destroy the void. Instead, as you can see, it creates a kind of gilded cage for nothingness. It contains it, transforming it from this all-consuming threat into a force that's, well, managed. It makes sure the void can never reach its ultimate goal of total erasure. Which brings us to our final act. We've seen the thesis of the void and the antithesis of Hecate and Salome. So now let's look at the synthesis, how these opposing forces finally resolve into a new, much more complex and much more hopeful reality. And this, right here, is the ultimate philosophical win. What Hecate and Salome prove is that philosophy can actually be a force of nature. They show that the not I, the darkness of the abyss, which you could think of as a metaphor for trauma, can become a host for shimmering light. It doesn't have to just be a victim of negation. It can be negotiated with, integrated, and transformed. This table just beautifully shows the total transformation of what the source calls the fourfold Atlantis. Before, the sea was a grave. Now, it bows in wholeness. The soil, which was totally irrelevant in this watery abyss, now becomes a terrestrial anchor for new life. The sun, once hidden by the blight, is now a source of regeneration. And most importantly, the spirit, once locked in frozen grief, now vibrates with a frequency of hope. And so we arrive at this, a harmonized frequency of restorative grace. This is the final state of the fourfold Atlantis. It's a reality where sea, soil, sun, and spirit are all integrated into a restored world. A world that refuses to be dried up and die, where every single drop of water no longer carries a rune of death, but instead carries the memory and the potential for a restorative future. So the deadlock is broken. The stagnant trap has been transformed into a sacred laboratory. The great threat wasn't destroyed, but contained, integrated. And that leaves us with one final big question. In a reality that's been transformed from a grave into a laboratory, what new experiments, what new discoveries, what new adventures now await the human spirit?